Okay, welcome to the topic 3 video for Prelim Revision Series Cluster 3 Climate. Right, topic 3 is on climate action. It's a very short part here, but bear in mind everything in this topic 3 is liable to be tested as OEQ because you're looking at impacts. Okay, impacts of climate change, impacts of variations in climate. So it is really all action that you can take against the impacts in topic 2. So this everything can be OEQ. Okay, so KQ1, how does climate action help achieve sustainable development? So once again, you can look at it in terms of either what are some of the adaptation and mitigation strategies, okay, or how can you package it so that climate change can be viewed as a threat multiplier and how it can constrain developmental paths. Okay, so stimulus-led questions, if it's not an OEQ, it will be stimulus-led questions. We've seen infographics which talk about certain of these strategies. Okay, it can be describe a question, it can be account question, but this area can be easily packaged into a recall question. If they cannot set everything as OEQ, you can only have one OEQ, and it may not be climate even. So example, like this is something that you may be given, infographic with a pile of information asking you to describe the key causes. Then when you say with reference, you have to clearly pick up information from the diagram that's given to you. Okay, when they tell you, then maybe a second component can be describing how the climate change impact the Asia and Pacific regions in the next 50 years. So you look at impacts to the region component here. These are what they expect to happen in the next 50 years, right? Can also be in terms of a choropleth map, right? Giving you common areas of maybe what climatic risk, which areas are higher risk of climate change, right? So who are the ones actually, if you look at it very carefully, all the coastal towns, the very heavy developed countries that have large coastal areas with big coastal cities are always at higher risk than the rest of the world. Okay, so for KQ2, why do climate risks vary across places? Right, in this area here, we will be looking more at in terms of interaction between your hazards and human systems, how it impacts humans, how it can potentially lead to loss of human lives. Okay, and also what are some of the short-term events that can happen? What are some of the long-term events that can happen in terms of climate risk? So short-term events are your climatic hazards, largely the hazards that come because of climatic change, right? Long-term ones are things that are constantly growing in its intensity, becoming more and more often, becoming more and more serious, but it's a gradual, slow process. But if you look at it past 10 years, then you realize, oh gosh, in the past 10 years, sea level rise has been significant, okay, or the duration of droughts has been significant. Finally, looking at the fact how climate risk actually affects the vulnerability and exposure, how that impacts how risky your area is, right? This one, always remember, if the more vulnerable you are, the poorer, the less tech that you have at your hands, and the higher exposure you have to these areas, then the larger your risk is. Basically, it's just along that line of thought. The final bits here, what we tend to see is we have actually seen a OEQ that compares short-term versus long-term events, which is more serious. But for vulnerability exposure, generally that is tested as a recall or stimulus-led answer. KQ3, right? This area here, mitigation strategies, whether it's to use carbon sinks to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, right? Or whether you are using societal environmental habit change, right? These are all OEQ possibilities, whether across the sections or within the sections itself. Okay, so you will need, I repeat, you will need to know your examples pretty well. Okay, so like this, mitigation strategies are more effective than those that reduce carbon's greenhouse gas emission. So is it true that carbon sinks work better than greenhouse gas emission control? Right. So what are your factors they can play with? Right, reduce greenhouse gas control. You can talk about international agreements. Can talk about use of clean energy. If you want to enhance carbon sinks, what are we looking at? Building either oceans, forests, okay, through land use protection and change, right, or forest regeneration. These are all the things that you can talk about. Must you do two? No. Okay, I very recently got a question from one of the students whether it is a must to do two in this case. I know because you don't have time, right? So actually, it's a luxury to write three factor paragraphs already because you still need a fourth one for evaluation. So they do not expect you to write two. For KQ4 in the topic 3 in the finale, right? How effective are adaptation strategies in building communities' resilience to climate change? What are we looking at? We're looking at adaptation strategies. Okay, right? What kind of adaptation strategies? Whether it's structural, technological, or you're looking at social and institutional. Okay, how do these strategies work? So once again, this is possibly OEQ if you get a climate OEQ, right? So in detail within, right, they can ask you specifically lock you in into things like raising awareness education. It's more effective than national policies, right? So they lock you in with two factors. You do need to roughly know what kind of a national policy you will want to raise here lah. Because awareness and education is something that even if you cannot remember much, think about your geography lessons, think about what you've been going through in science in primary school, awareness, things that are around you. Okay, you can use that as an example already. But if they do lock you into things like this, they do try to use factors that you would probably have examples in real life, so that if you cannot remember examples from the textbook or from the SLS slides, then at the very least you still have something to fall back on, okay, for your factor paragraphs. Right, so with that, actually we've come to the end of climate cluster 3, the revision component for this. Now you do need to go and relook at all the content. This is really just a guide to let you scaffold what kind of questioning will come out for which kind of area, so that when you're preparing and doing the hard revision and understanding, re-understanding rather, right, you know which kind of examples are important, what kind of questions you will probably need to meet in terms of the various coverage in topics. So that's the end for cluster 3, right? We will be using more videos to cover the rest of the clusters.